At a county surplus auction in Central Florida, lot number 47 sat baking in the sun at the far end of the gravel yard. A white box truck with a 16-foot cargo body, faded paint peeling off the cab, rust creeping up the wheel wells, a cracked windshield held together with packing tape. The odometer read 212,000 miles. The listing described it in 3 words: runs needs work. In auction language, that basically means pray. Bidding opened at $100. Nobody raised a paddle. The auctioneer dropped it to $50. Still nothing. People were there for the pickup trucks and the cargo vans. Nobody wanted a beat-up box truck that looked like it had been parked behind a warehouse and forgotten for 3 years. Then a hand went up in the back row. A man in a faded gray hoodie, sitting alone on the end of a folding chair. He bid $100, then $150, then $200. Sold. The man who just bought that truck had been homeless for 14 months. He had $112 left to his name after the title transfer. And the thing he was about to do with that rusted box on wheels would eventually get millions of people online arguing about a single question: not whether it could be done, whether it should count as a home at all. To understand how someone ends up sleeping under a bridge in Central Florida, you do not need a dramatic backstory. Sometimes it is just ordinary bad luck stacked on top of itself until the weight breaks everything. This man, who goes by Danny online, worked as a Finnish carpenter for nearly 15 years. Crown molding, built-in bookshelves, custom cabinetry. He was good at it. He had a small apartment, a used pickup, and enough steady work to keep both. Then a fall from scaffolding tore the rotator cuff in his right shoulder. The surgery went fine. The recovery did not. He could not swing a hammer for 4 months, and 4 months without income turned into 60 days to vacate the apartment. Disability took 90 days to process. By the time the first check arrived, the apartment was gone, the truck was sold to cover medical bills, and Danny was sleeping in a shelter near downtown Orlando. Shelters have rules, curfews, lottery systems for beds, limits on how long you can stay. Danny described it as living on someone else's schedule, with no ability to plan more than 12 hours ahead. You line up at 4 in the afternoon, hoping your number gets called. If it does, you get a cot and a locker until 7 the next morning. If it does not, you figure something else out. There is no guaranteed spot. There is no consistency. And after 90 days, most shelters rotate you out to make room for the next person. So Danny started sleeping outside, under overpasses near the interstate, behind strip malls where the dumpsters blocked the wind, in the tree line along highway, on ramps where the noise from passing cars drowned out everything else. He learned which gas stations would let him use the bathroom. He learned which fast food places had outlets near the door. And he learned that the hardest part of being homeless is not the cold or the hunger. It is the invisibility. People look through you like you are part of the sidewalk. Through all of it, he kept paying for one thing: a 10 by 10 storage unit on the east side of Orlando. $53 a month, paid with the last scraps of his disability money. Inside that unit was every carpentry tool he owned: his miter saw, his drills, his chisels, his hand planes, his clamps. 15 years of work packed into a metal box. He could have sold all of it and eaten for a month. He never did. And the reason why is the entire story. Because when Danny saw that auction listing online, he wasn't looking at a truck. He was looking at the only thing those tools could still build him. He wasn't thinking about tiny homes or van life when he climbed into the cab and turned the key. He was thinking about 4 walls, a roof, and a door that locks from the inside. The engine coughed, sputtered, and caught. He drove it to a Walmart parking lot that night and slept on the bare metal floor of the cargo box with a sleeping bag and a flashlight. The steel walls radiated whatever temperature existed outside, and in January in Florida, that meant low 40s by midnight. Rain drummed against the aluminum roof so loud it sounded like gravel hitting a tin can. Water pooled in the corners. The floor was warped plywood over rusted steel, soft in places, spongy where moisture had been sitting for years. Danny lay there doing math in his head. $112, 16 feet of rotting box. He gave himself one rule before he fell asleep, and it was the rule that would carry the entire build. Every problem has a cheaper solution if you're willing to spend time instead of money. He had nothing but time. He started the next morning. The first month was demolition. He pulled out the rotted plywood subfloor, stripped the old cargo tie-down rails, and scraped every wall down to bare metal. That's when he found the first real problem. Behind the original panels near the rear doors were two rust holes the size of his fist. Not surface rust, holes. Holes that meant the box was not actually watertight, and an insulated build over a leaking shell would trap water and rot from the inside within a single rainy season. So before anything else, the holes had to die. He patched them with scrap sheet metal from a junkyard, riveted tight and sealed with silicone caulk. He ground the rust off every reachable surface with a wire wheel on a drill he already owned. Then he coated the bare metal with a rust-inhibiting primer, $12 at a discount hardware outlet. That primer was the single most important purchase of the entire build, because everything that came after depended on those walls staying dry. The floor got 3 coats of rubberized undercoating from aerosol cans. $14 total. By the end of month 1, the truck was still completely empty inside, but it was sealed, and sealed was the foundation everything else stood on. Then, 3 weeks into the framing, the truck nearly ended the project before it had a room in it. One morning in the Walmart lot, the engine wouldn't turn over, not the solar battery Danny would install later. The truck's actual starter battery had been drained by an alternator that had been quietly failing since auction day. A new alternator and battery at a shop runs $250. Danny, at that exact moment, had $112. A truck that won't start isn't a home. It's a fine waiting to happen, and a tow away from gone. He spent 2 days on the phone with junkyards. On the 3rd day, he found a compatible alternator from a wrecked delivery truck at a salvage yard in Kissimmee. $35. He watched a tutorial on his phone, borrowed a socket set from a fellow parking lot dweller, and replaced it himself in 4 hours in the heat. A tested battery from the same yard cost another $30. $65 instead of $250. The engine turned over on the first try, and Danny stood there realizing his one rule had just been tested under real pressure and held. Time instead of money. It worked, and he was about to need it again. Insulation came next, and this is where his resourcefulness really showed. Behind big box hardware stores, damaged rigid foam insulation gets tossed into dumpsters almost every week. Cracked panels, dented corners, boards with forklift holes punched straight through them. Completely usable if you cut around the damage. Danny spent 2 weeks collecting enough 2-inch foam to line every wall in the ceiling. For the framing, he broke down wooden shipping pallets from behind a furniture warehouse. Pallet wood is rough and full of staples, but it's straight and it's free. He ripped the planks to width on a friend's table saw and screwed a simple stud frame directly into the steel ribs of the cargo body. He skinned the walls with thin plywood paneling, salvaged from curbside construction waste. When those panels went up, the cargo box stopped looking like a cargo box and started looking like a room. Danny stepped back and felt good about it for exactly one night, because the next morning, the inside of the windshield was wet, not from a leak, from him, from breathing 8 hours in a sealed, insulated metal box. This is the problem that quietly kills more van builds than any other, and most people never see it coming. A sealed, insulated shell traps every bit of moisture from breathing, cooking, and body heat. Without airflow, that moisture condenses on the cold metal behind the walls, soaks into the brand new foam, and breeds mold within weeks. Danny had just spent 2 weeks installing the perfect conditions for his own build to rot from the inside. If he'd skinned the walls and ignored that wet windshield, he'd have been tearing the whole thing out by summer. The fix was AR flow. He cut 2 rectangular openings high on the side walls near the roofline and fitted them with louvered vents pulled from a bathroom renovation dumpster. He wired a small 12-volt computer fan to one vent to push air out, with the opposite vent serving as passive intake. Total cost, under $6. $6 stood between this build and a slow, invisible failure. He very nearly missed it. With the box finally able to breathe, the sleeping loft changed everything about living in that space. Danny built a raised platform across the back third of the truck, about 3 feet off the floor, framed in 2x4s. The space underneath became a massive storage bay for tools, clothes, and supplies. The mattress on top was a full-size memory foam unit he found on the curb during move-out week at a nearby apartment complex. He checked it for stains, cleaned it with baking soda and vinegar, and wrapped it in a waterproof cover from a thrift store. Above the bed went a reading light wired to his battery system and a small shelf for his phone and water bottle. He hung curtains on tension rods using bed sheets from Goodwill. When those curtains were drawn, the sleeping loft was private, warm, and genuinely comfortable. Not comfortable for a truck, just comfortable. But a comfortable bed in a box you can't power or heat is still just camping, and Danny knew the 2 hardest problems were still ahead of him. The kitchen went in along the driver's side wall, just forward of the bed. A single burner propane camp stove sits on a butcher block counter he found at a Habitat for Humanity restore for $8. A cutting board hinges down from the wall for extra prep space. A 5-gallon water jug with a battery-powered pump feeds a stainless steel basin that lifts out for cleaning and drains into a gray water container underneath. No permanent plumbing, because permanent plumbing freezes, leaks, and fails, and Danny was building for reliability, not for photos. A 12-volt cooler runs off his solar setup at refrigerator temperature without the power draw of a full fridge. The entire kitchen, stove and jug and pump and basin included came to $47, which brings up the 2 things that actually separate a vehicle you sleep in from a vehicle you live in: power and heat. Get these wrong, and everything before them is worthless. For power, Danny bought a 100-watt solar panel from a guy on Facebook Marketplace for $40. Slightly scratched, fully functional. He mounted it flat on the roof using brackets he bent from aluminum angle stock. That panel feeds a charge controller that costs $19 new, and that controller charges a single deep cycle marine battery he pulled from a boat salvage yard for $25. That battery runs his lights, his phone charger, his water pump, his cooler, and his ventilation fan. On a sunny Florida day, the panel puts more into the battery than he draws out in 24 hours. Heat was the harder one, and it is where Danny's carpentry instincts stopped being enough, and the stakes got physical. Florida winters are not brutal, but inside an unheated metal box, the temperature drops fast after sunset, and the obvious solution is also the one that kills people. A propane heater in a sealed space produces carbon monoxide, and Danny had just spent $6 sealing that space tight. So he went the other direction. He found a tiny cast iron wood burning stove, 14 inches tall, at a flea market for $35. He vented it through the roof with stainless steel stovepipe and a proper flashing kit to stop both leaks and fire risk. A carbon monoxide detector near the ceiling was not optional, and it was the cheapest insurance in the build. That little stove transformed the truck. A few scraps of wood in 20 minutes, and the whole interior was warm enough to sit in a t-shirt long after the fire died down. The finished truck is hard to believe next to what it looked like on auction day. The walls are clean light plywood under a hand-brushed coat of polyurethane. The floor is clicked together, vinyl plank over the rubberized subfloor. The sleeping loft has real bedding and pillows and a curtained alcove that feels like a small bedroom. A fold-down table on the passenger side serves as a desk and an eating spot. There are hooks for jackets, a shoe rack by the rear doors, and a bookshelf made from a wine crate mounted to the wall. The small details are what tip it from project into home. Danny sanded and stained a piece of driftwood he pulled from a lake and mounted it above the bed as a shelf. A battery-powered clock hangs by the kitchen. There is a welcome mat inside the rear doors cut from a scrap of outdoor carpet. None of that was necessary. He did all of it anyway because, as he put it, the difference between surviving in a vehicle and living in one is whether you bother making it yours. He showers at a gym membership that costs $10 a month, laundry once a week at a laundromat. He cooks rice and beans, eggs, canned soup, the occasional steak on a cast iron pan over the propane burner. He parks at Walmart lots, truck stops, and a friend's driveway when it is free. On weekends, he sometimes drives to a state park where overnight parking costs $5. His total monthly cost of living, gas and food and propane and gym and phone and truck insurance combined comes to roughly $430. A studio apartment in that same part of Central Florida starts at $1,400. When someone posted photos of the build to a van life forum, the response was immediate. People wanted measurements, material lists, cost breakdowns. They wanted to know how a man with no workshop, no budget, and no permanent address built something that looked like it belonged in a tiny home magazine. And this is where that running total finally pays off, because Danny had written down every single purchase in a notebook from the first day. The entire conversion, the $200 truck included, came to $687. The most expensive single item was the solar panel at $40. The cheapest was a bag of wood screws, $1.50 at a garage sale. But 687 isn't the number that matters. The number that matters is 0. That's how many nights Danny has slept outside since the build was finished. He's back doing carpentry now. Small jobs, word of mouth. The finish work he was always good at. Custom shelving for a restaurant, trim for a remodel in Winter Park. He saves most of what he earns because his overhead is almost nothing. He talks about buying a piece of rural land someday, parking the truck on it, and building a workshop beside it. Not a house, a workshop. Because for Danny, the tools always came first, and now you know why he never sold them. Ask him if he'd move back into an apartment, and he pauses before answering. He says the truck gave him something an apartment never did. Control. He decides where to park, when to move, what to spend. Nobody can evict him. Nobody can raise his rent. The door locks from the inside, and the key is in his pocket. More than 500,000 people in the United States are homeless on any given night. Not all of them have Danny's skills or 15 years of tools waiting in a storage unit for a second chance. But what he proved with a $200 box truck is worth holding on to. A home was never the address or the mortgage or the landlord's signature. A home is a space you feel safe enough to close your eyes in. Danny built one out of scrap wood, salvaged foam, and $687. And he built it himself. If this story stuck with you, hit subscribe. I cover builds, conversions, and real stories of people solving impossible problems with almost nothing every single week. And if you want to see a build that started with even less than Danny had, that one is playing right now.